In today's modern age, one realizes that you can't really invent the wheel, no matter how hard you try. The same is true of created media, books, pictures, and video games as well. While there are new IPs that are continually introduced, they're mainly just variations on a theme or idea. Sometimes you don't necessarily need to introduce a new storyline or gimmick. Sometimes if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But sometimes, just sometimes, it is nice to refresh an idea. To give a new coat of paint to something from a long time ago. What once was old is new again. In 1989, Capcom released an arcade game called Strider on their CPS arcade hardware. It was a simple platforming action game that featured a protagonist called Hiryu. I've played the original. It's a classic arcade title from my time as a kid, and it also was an early hit for Capcom. Fast forward to 2014, and the point of this review, Strider, aka Strider 2014, aka Strider Remake. Or maybe you could consider it a remastering. Either way, this game is crazy good. And I mean crazy good. Released in 2014 for multiple platforms and created by Capcom and Double Helix Games, I didn't know anything about the remake till almost a year after it came out. Didn't hear a damn thing. I was just browsing Xbox Live with my 360 when I found it, and decided to buy it. Holy shit, was that money well spent. Let's get into it. Let me correct myself to begin with. Strider 2014 is technically not a remake, and it's not a remaster, although the developers have said that it's in the same universe as the other games. Yet it doesn't follow or precede any of the other ones. It's its own standalone game, but it's still a Strider game if that makes any sense. The story revolves around a group of mercenaries known as Striders, and their battle against an all-powerful dictator known as Grand Maester Mio. Mio? I'm gonna go with Mio. You take on the role of Hiro, the youngest ever Strider to ever attain the rank of Special Class A, which pretty much means this fucker can kill anybody and anything. And one would even go as far as to think that maybe they've been cybernetically enhanced, but they turn out to be just super badass future ninjas just to make things simple. Hiryu is sent to destroy Mio at any cost, and sets off across Kazakh City, the future dystopian capital city where Mio controls everything from. Taking place in the fictional year Mio 0048, it's never really explained where Mio came from, or how he rose to power so quickly. But who cares? Your mission is just to kill him, and that's all you need. Remember, this series of games started out in the arcades in the late 1980s, so there really isn't that much backstory or development, using the previous games to build from. They could have expanded upon things a lot more, being that it was 2014, but for this type of game, it doesn't necessarily need it, or warrant it. It does just fine being an action platforming side-scroller. Anyways, you descend towards Kazakh City in a glider, and you're dropped into the shit. Literally. I'm only talking about storming an entire city single-handedly, and not anything else about the game itself. You have your usual movement, and any access you want, plus jumping and slashing. Your main weapon is called a Cypher, and it's pretty much a plasma sword. Functions very similarly to Raiden's high-frequency blade in Metal Gear Rising, in that this weapon can pretty much cut through anything. Your Cypher can be upgraded during the course of the game, allowing different amounts of damage to color-coded enemies, being able to open higher level doors as well as different secondary attacks. Some forms of the Cypher can also deflect enemy laser fire, a la lightsabers. How freaking cool is that? But you can't do it with all enemy attacks, unfortunately. That would make the game probably a little too easy. At your disposal, you also have throwable weapons called kunai, small daggers which can be flung about. Besides running around like a maniac, there are two methods of fast travel available to Hiryu in forms of a panther and eagle, which can be used at specific points throughout Kazakh City in order to venture to new areas, or to return to previous ones almost instantaneously. These two helpful creatures can be used as well as offensive attacks, dealing large amounts of area damage to many enemies at once. Hiryu himself is quite adept in movement, being able to jump, double jump later, freely climb on walls and ceilings, as well as using an air dash during later parts of the game. Enemies are pretty varied in terms of overall dispersion, although there isn't too much variety in terms of individual designs. The majority of enemies are ground enemies like soldiers, and different mechanical tanks and robots. There are also flying enemies like gunships, turrets, and a few other things. The world of Kazakh City is massive, with several huge areas to explore and kill through. Some areas, like the beginning area, are outside, whereas later on in the game, you move into the interior of the city, and even some underground areas. At the conclusion of each zone, you'll face off against a large monstrosity of a boss, usually mechanical in nature. However, there are a few other human bosses as well. Reaching the end level of the game, you battle it out with Grand Maester Mio himself, demolishing him and saving Kazakh City from future strife. But not before he changes into this giant space alien-looking thing. I don't even know what the fuck this thing is. It's almost bordering on Bayonetta-style boss over-designed silliness. But for this game, it works strangely. You ride his dead carcass back into Earth's atmosphere. Again, don't ask me how this is even possible, but it happens. Game over. Let's get into the nitty-gritty, or for me, the good stuff. Graphically speaking, this game looks fucking amazing. One of the first things that struck me when watching the trailer before I decided to buy it was the graphical presentation. Double Helix has done an absolutely phenomenal job of bringing over the world of Strider, then jacking the visuals up to about 13 or so. While the game plays in traditional 2D, the visuals are designed in a striking 2.5D format, giving incredible depth and scale to virtually every square foot of the game world. During outside areas, there are very nice weather effects like snow and rain. Effects are also handled really well, with bloom lighting, explosions, laser beams all looking awesome. There are subtler touches as well, like Hiryu's scarf that flows in the breeze, a la Shinobi. Weapon strikes look as hard as they feel when striking enemies, and the overall visual style just can't be beat. Hats off to you, Double Helix. Well done. The audio side of things is just as kick-ass as the visuals are, and I'm glad they're here. You can easily have a visually nice game, but the audio can degrade the experience, and vice versa. The majority of sound effects throughout the game fit nicely, and nothing feels cheap or silly. Slicing through enemies yields a very nice metallic slashing sound, as does continually slashing at robots and other metal-clad enemies. Using your climbing hook also sounds really nice, and gives the players a very real sense of grasping onto metal gratings and other climbing surfaces. Voice acting is, I'd say, sufficient for the amount of spoken dialogue in the game. Hiryu obviously never says anything, but a lot of the enemies as well as the bosses do have dialogue, while sometimes verging on the silly. I'll admit it, Mio is indeed guilty of this fault, as they made him sound like some cracked out nutcase circus clown that's high on PCP or something.
Incompetence. The people of this planet have squandered the gifts we gave them. All of their imperfections and weaknesses have given us clarity. We will start anew and bring about the new age of Mayo.
But again, he's not from this Earth, so I think most people will let that slide. You know, considering he's a fucking alien. The soundtrack for this game is easily one of my favorites. I'll admit I wasn't totally familiar with any common themes from the previous games, but if they're here, then they're awesome. A lot of the time, the music plays along very well with what's happening on screen, not being too intrusive, but being there just enough to complement the action, or the traversing of areas. The main standout track for me since day one is called The Moon Tower. It usually comes during high-intensity combat areas or during major times during your progression. It's a high-energy, driving piece of music that totally captures the essence of the game and makes you feel like a total badass cyber ninja, running around, killing everybody, and getting shit done. Hell yeah!
Yeah!
Overall, Strider 2014 is one hell of a game, believe me. I took a chance on this title with my Xbox 360, and it's become one of my favorites. Plus, it had the added benefit of only being $15, regardless of what platform you play it on. I haven't played it in a while since getting rid of my 360, but I've seriously been thinking lately about buying it again on the Xbox One, just because this game is so much fun. It's a perfect example, to me, of the right way a series reboot should be done, much like Donkey Kong Country and other games of the caliber. The graphics, the presentation, the music, the fun factor, they're all 10 out of 10. In closing, even though this game is already 4 years old, don't be dismissive about it, especially if, like me, you played the original Strider in arcades way back in the early 90s, or even Strider 2 on the original PlayStation. Double Helix has done a fantastic job of carrying over all the series' trademarks, while creating a visual and audio feast for the senses. There's plenty of collectibles and different difficulty levels, as well as achievements. So for $15, there's actually quite a bit of replayability going on here. But don't take my word for it. You have to go play it for yourself to decide. As always, thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Grab your cipher and go slash it out.